Hello and welcome to Gabbett Media, I'm Grant Abbott, and in today's session we'll be continuing our modelling for the wooden bridge over the stream scene, and by the end of the session we should have our model ready for painting. Now if you're not particularly proficient with modelling just yet, but you still want to have a go at painting, I'll place this model on Gumroad so there'll be a link in the description and you'll be able to paint it before next time. So this is roughly where we got to last time, and I'm going to talk about the other areas apart from the base. So I'll zoom into this area with full stop or period key on your numpad, and we'll take a look at these elements. So you'll notice all my objects have smooth shading. You'll want them smooth shading when you are painting. So right click on your objects and set to smooth shading, and you paint the shading and highlights on. Now if I show you the finished result, you can see that you only really need to make one pillar. You may want to make two if you're trying to build up a module and use this in other models. Remember, you can rotate it around the Z 90 degrees and keep getting sort of different variations of it, and you can also put it upside down and get another variation. So this one's actually the same beam used several times over. If I go into edit mode, you can see that they are linked duplicates. So I pressed Alt D to duplicate, so any changes I make to one will make them to all. So I only had to paint one of these and just move it and rotate it around and scale it in some places to get the different shapes. I'll very quickly time-lapse making this to make a point, so shift right click, add a cube, scale it into position, into edit mode, 2 loop cuts, rotate them really slightly, turn snapping off though, scale the top up, rotate it very slightly, and there we've got a really simple beam. Make sure you put a tiny bit of variation on it so it's got that sort of warped wood feel. Now you'll notice in my model my edges are very sharp, and if we look at that Sketchfab model as well, you can see that their edges in many places are very sharp too. That does go with the hand painted look and feel, but it may be that you want a smoother look. If you want that, you will need to go in and bevel your edges. And if you followed along my low poly weld tutorial, then that's a different kind of style that you might like. So Control B, moving the mouse, and remember I've scaled it, so my bevel is going more in the Z axis than it is in the X and Y. So let's undo that. Back to object mode, Control A and set the scale. Now into edit mode and Control B, and I've got my bevel. Now I wouldn't add many segments to this unless, again, that's the style you're going for and you want really curvy corners. But again, consider how far away you're going to be. These are still quite sharp from this distance, but these ones have a bit of a curve. You may want to add one segment to give it that nice rounded feel. And this is only for the bits where you see the corners like this. As you can see in my model, they've got very sharp edges, and that's something you might want to change in this one. But that is adding quite a lot of polygons, so be aware of that. For these elements, I go into edit mode so you can see how I've done that, and it's fairly straightforward. But again, you can see that I've pressed Alt D and it's a duplicated link. For the beams across the middle, you can see that I've added a little notch in there. I'll very briefly go through that. So made in exactly the same way as the beams, but obviously flatter. With a loop cut down the middle, you can use 2 loop cuts as well. I only used one on mine. But to create the notch, use the knife tool with K and then click to add vertices and create a simple cut like this, and press enter to complete. Now I'll probably need to bring this edge along slightly so it's not so long, and I'll move these just across very slightly so there's some variation there. Then the quickest way is just to delete those faces, and then into edge mode, select the 2 edges and press F to fill. And there we go. With a bit of tidying up, job done. The stones at the bottom, if you take a look at those, I did 3 different stones for the pathway, and they're duplicated across to the other side, and they're very, very basic. Again, they've got quite sharp edges, as you can see there. So you might want to bevel the edges for those as well. And my rocks are fairly high poly really. They probably should have been reduced slightly, but that's also fairly straightforward. Shift right click, Shift A to add, icosphere, and you can turn on proportional edit into edit mode and select faces if you want, pull them around, Or you can go into sculpt mode, which I prefer, isolate it with / on your numpad, and pull these things around into a rocky sort of shape. Not that this is particularly good. Press the smooth button if you need to with shift. I'm not sure why isolation mode has given me this object as well, but it's not making too much difference. So we've got a sort of very simple rock there. Back to layout mode with my beautiful rock, and then go over to the decimate in the modifiers where the spanner is, add modifier, decimate, and you can reduce that and give it a low poly feel. Watch out for very sharp edges, but again it depends on the style of rock you're going for. If you're going for nice smooth rocks, then you can bring it down to about here, press apply, into edit mode, grab all your vertices with A, and there's a tool up here, vertex, smooth vertex, and it smooths them out a bit. As you can just about see there, if I go to smooth shading now, it has still got a few sharp points. It depends what you want out of your rock again, whether you need a sort of smooth looking finished piece, or you're focused on a really low poly count. If you need more smoothness, then don't decimate quite so far. The last thing that I created was the river. So here's the base that I reduced earlier. We can actually use the base as guidance for our river. So 3 to go to face mode, C to circle select, as I talked about before, and select these faces along the bottom here. Now I can duplicate those with Shift D and just leave them where they are by left clicking, and then P to separate by selection. And now I've got a new river bed at the bottom here when I go into object mode, then I can go into edit mode, select all, and extrude upwards. That way my river follows roughly the path of my base, and I can start moving these edges out where I need to. And I just intersected my river bed, as you can see there. So that's a quick guide to how I created each element. Hopefully that's not too quick for you. If you are getting confused, then I suggest you go back to one of the beginner courses where there's a bit more guidance on how to model these different types of shapes. So in the next episode, we will finally be painting. Hopefully you've got a good base to work from. So I hope this helped, and I'll see you next time.